Welcome to In All Honesty, the podcast where we get real about life and all the problems that come with it. I'm Michelle Elman, and I'm that friend who we all know is a little bit too honest. You might not come to me when you get back together with your ex, but I'll be there for you when it all goes tits up. Welcome back to In All Honesty. It's been quite a few years, and I'm so excited to be back because I really miss talking to you guys. And I guess the place to start is what's going on in my life. It's been quite a rocky few months. And for those of you who don't know, I was engaged and I shortly found out the day that I announced it on my Instagram that he had been cheating on me with someone who followed me. Ironically, with someone who'd read all my books. And the reason why I saw that DM that day is because she'd messaged me in the past. And my whole world came crashing down in less than 24 hours. It has become quite a media storm since, so you've probably heard bits of the story, but you definitely don't know the full story. So if we go back to April, I was in the country. I had been writing my book and it hadn't been going as smoothly as I wanted. So I had decided to leave London to focus on my book for a few weeks. And my boyfriend was popping in and out, having to go into the office, but then coming to join me as much as he could. And it was a Saturday morning, and one of my favorite things to do is paddleboarding. So we had decided the first thing we were going to do is go paddleboarding. I put on my raggedy painting shirt and my tiny shorts that I've had for way too long. And it was a normal Saturday morning, except I just felt really scared from the moment I woke up. I actually even remember looking in the mirror that morning and noticing my whole forehead had broken out in spots, which from a spirituality point of view is actually your third eye. And I remember noticing it going, something weird is happening. And even as I was putting on my clothes, I remember having this feeling, and I like to think I'm quite an intuitive person. But as we were loading up the truck with the boards and everything just felt a little bit off and I wasn't sure why. And we drove up to the paddleboarding lake, which is actually my favorite place in the world. And I think the sad part about all of this happening since is I've actually never been able to tell you the proposal story because it was one of the best days. And it's sad to not be able to look back on it and have that happiness now because it is so tinged with sadness. But I remember going on the paddleboard and it hadn't been warm for a while. So I actually don't think I'd been paddleboarding in months. And I wouldn't let go of the dock. There's a pole on the dock that helps you get on the paddleboard. And usually I'm a little bit scared when I'm standing for the first time, but I wasn't even standing. I was sitting on the board. And I remember my boyfriend being like, why won't you let go of the dock? And I was like, I don't know. I just feel really scared. Eventually he convinced me to do one round around the lake. And then I did. And then I just kept going, well, maybe I don't like paddleboarding anymore. And I think it was my brain trying to make sense of it and what I was feeling in my body. And eventually we decided to get out of the lake. And as we were getting out of the lake, I remember he was hesitating around the back. And I went around the truck and was like, what are you doing? And it was like time slowed down. I saw him reach for his pocket, come round. And there was this moment where I caught the look on his face and he looked so scared. And then he hesitated because he didn't know which knee to go down on. And it was like slow motion, his hand reaching into his pocket. And as he was going down, I just had that moment of, oh, he's going to propose. He had planned this whole speech and then couldn't remember any of it and was like, I need my phone. And I'd read out this speech talking about how I already think I'm the center of attention, but what I don't know is that I'm the center of his universe. He actually spoke about how every day with me is his favorite day and that he looks forward to having a favorite day for the rest of his life. And I think it's just really sad looking back on that because I believed it. And in some ways I probably still do believe it. But it was the perfect proposal because it was just us. There was no one else around. It was authentic. I loved the fact that I was in this messy painting shirt and these raggedy shorts and that we were half soaked from the paddle boards. I love that it was in the mud behind a truck. And I think what's beautiful about a proposal is that when it's done in the right way, it's also that feeling of being so known by a person that they know the way that you would like it, even if it's not the picture perfect Instagram way. We had this whole plan that we weren't going to tell anyone. And of course, me being me, we ran back to the house and I told everyone within 2 seconds. I remember someone had made lunch and we'd had sausage rolls on the table. And I kept reaching for the sausage rolls, being like, oh, I think I'll have one, showing my hand like over and over to see if they would notice the ring. We watched Grey's Anatomy. We were on FaceTime to most of our friends and family that day. And then it was the following morning. And because my family live in Hong Kong, the only people we hadn't told were my family because they had been asleep by the time we were engaged. And so we told them in the morning. And right after I told my dad, I decided I was going to post on Instagram. Now, I'd never posted my boyfriend on Instagram, and it wasn't a conscious decision to keep him private. It was actually just a feeling of being really protective of him. I've had negative comments over the course of the last decade of being a content creator, but actually someone saying something negative about my partner was so terrifying to me that I never really wanted to put him in that position. And I didn't want his self-esteem or his confidence to ever be affected by comments online. And knowing that my audience is very protective, there was a part of me that wanted to keep it private. But when we got engaged, it just felt right to share it. So I hit post on that engagement photo. And everyone was so happy for me. The congratulations poured in. And I went through my DMs and I saw this DM probably about half an hour after I posted saying, is your fiance and his full name? We were on the phone to his brother at the time because his brother had been in a pub when we'd got engaged. And so we'd not had a chance to have a full FaceTime conversation with him. And my fiance has this big thing about politeness. So it was like, oh, we're on the phone to my brother, put your phone away. And I didn't really think anything of it. So we finished the FaceTime call and then my fiance said he needs to go to the loo. He went to the loo, came back and said, oh, I've just been sick. Now, I trusted this man so much that there was no part of me that connected that DM to the fact that he'd been sick, to the point where I literally went, oh no, did you eat something funny? And then I pressed play on a Grey's Anatomy episode. Very weirdly, it's the episode where George dies, and that was the episode I kept saying for the last 3 years, you just need to get to that episode. And I pressed play, we were lying in bed together, and then I paused it, and it had probably been playing for 5 seconds, and I went, oh, by the way, that DM, who is that person? And he was like, oh, I don't know, it's probably some girl I dated years ago. And I was like, but she knows your full name. And I remember just thinking, he was acting really strange. Like, it wasn't anything that I thought was malicious or that he was being suspicious in any way. And also, I'd received a DM like that before. So when I got that message, I thought it was a colleague, because we've had it before where a family friend of his had actually sent the exact same message because they'd recognized his dog and his cat in one of my stories. And so actually that family friend knew we were dating long before his family, long before we were even official. I think it was 3 dates into us dating. And so when I got this DM saying, is your fiance this person? My mind just went to, it must be a colleague. It was only when he said, oh, well, it must be a woman I dated. And I was like, well, surely you would remember her name if you dated her. And as we were sitting there and we were doing this back and forth of, but if she knows your full name, how do you not know hers? She sent through screenshots of a dating profile. And very strangely, it was the exact same photos he had on his dating profile that I had swiped on 3 years before. So there was a part of me that was hoping that it was an old dating profile. And I just remember saying to him, please tell me first. Please just tell me first. I don't want to find out from this woman. Through all of that, he kept saying, why would you say yes to me if you would believe a stranger on the internet over me? Is that how little trust you have? And he kept saying, you're ruining our engagement weekend. And I just kept repeating and begging him. I was begging him, please just tell me first. And then the text came in after saying, I slept with him in November. I can show you the text messages. He said he was single. And then the next thing I noticed from the dating profile was that it said Milan. He was in Milan in November, and then I noticed his age, and it said 29, and I was with him for his 28th birthday and for his 30th birthday. And as he kept denying it, I got up and went to the other room. I said I needed space. I remember him reaching his hand out and putting it on my knee, and me just going, please don't touch me right now. And I went to the other room, and at this point I was just shaking. I'm shaking right now, feeling exactly how I felt at the time, where it was just shock. And I went to the other room and I called my life coach. Now, this is going to sound really strange. Psychologists and life coaches have very different boundaries. You wouldn't be able to call a psychologist because they have rules in place that you can't talk to them out of session. But with my life coach, I've always been able to talk to her out of session, usually sending texts. And in the 10 years we've been working together, I've only ever called her twice. I mean, this was in the middle of the afternoon on a Sunday, but I called her in a panic. And not only did she know me, but she actually knew my fiance, because I've always really liked that thing that religions do where they go and see a pastor before you get engaged, and you go through the big questions about life and they check whether you're a good partnership together. But because I'm not a religious person, about a year before, I said to my partner, I always saw that as my future, that I would be having joint sessions with my partner one day. I really believe in maintenance over repairs. So she'd been seeing my partner for over a year as well. So I called her in a panic. At this point, I was completely in tears, sitting in this other room, just shaking, telling her what was happening. And she said, where is he? And I said, he's in the bedroom. She was like, go into the bedroom. So I went into the bedroom and I was texting this other woman at the same time saying, did you sleep with him in Milan? And she had replied saying, no, I slept with him the night he came back. And I said, he's denying it. Can you send me any proof? I believe you. I just need some evidence. And she said, this is the hotel we booked. He booked it. So I don't have any screenshots, but that's the hotel name. And so when I went into the other room with my life coach on the phone, she said to him, there's so much evidence against you. You actually need to prove some evidence that this isn't true. And that's when it occurred to me to ask him to type in the hotel name into his email address. He did, and the booking came up, the exact dates that she had said. And that's when I hung up the phone, and that's when he admitted to it. And then he admitted to another woman in Paris a month before. In total, he cheated on me with 3 women. Many more if you count all the messages on dating apps, but he'd gone on dates and slept with 3 women. And he eventually admitted to the 3rd one by the end of the day. But in that moment, he admitted to 2. And I just remember breaking down. Yesterday, one of my friends who was actually in the house at the time said there was this animalistic cry through the house. And she was so scared by it, she actually didn't come up to check what was happening, because it sounded like an animal wailing through the house. I won't lie, everything after that kind of goes a little bit blurry, but I remember going to the other room and calling my sister and her not picking up, ending up calling her husband. I feel really bad for her husband picking up that call, but it was just me wailing down the other end of the phone saying, he's cheated, he's cheated. And then the next thing I remember was out that window, you could see the front door, and I could see him walking out the front door. He's since told me that I actually asked him to leave, and that might have been true. I think what I had in my head was all our bags actually had been packed. We were going back to London that day, and the trains weren't working, and he had a business trip the next day. And so I think I still had the logical, rational side of my mind going, unless you go now, you're going to miss the train. And if you miss the train, you're not going to get the business trip. But almost how it happens sometimes in arguments, if you tell a person to leave, they don't actually leave. So there was still this shock of sitting on this chair, looking out the window going, he's not actually leaving. Wait, is he what? He's walking out? Like, he's walking out the house? Is he actually leaving now? Like, he's going to go without speaking to me. And what then followed was I actually got on the phone to the other woman. I had texted her saying, could I speak to you? Because I think at that point, I didn't believe a word he said. I think I just wanted to find out more information. It was like being stuck in not being able to process it because I didn't know the full story. When did he cheat? How many times did he cheat? Has he been texting her since? And because he left, I couldn't ask him those questions. So I messaged the other woman and asked if I could speak to her. And she filled me in. She actually sent me a video screenshot of every single text between them. And she told me that they'd slept together in November. It was one night. She's never seen him since, but that they have been texting, and he did ask to meet up with her in January. By that point, she was in a relationship, so she had said no. But on the screenshot, I saw him saying, well, even if you break up in a few months from now, please do reach out. So there is a really big part of me that knows that I don't think he would have stopped cheating. I actually think the next time he would have cheated on me was on that business trip the next day, on that Monday when he was going to Madrid. But that whole day was very much piecing together information, making it make sense in my head, looking at the dates, figuring out that actually the date he cheated on me was the first time in Paris, was the day after his cousin's wedding and the day before we went on a family holiday together. That the first time he messaged her was the night we went ring shopping. And it was details like that that just break your heart. And I think it sends you into a like, how much of what I've lived through is real? Was it real before he started cheating? Could it still be real while he was cheating? The main thing my life coach told me that day was do not make any big decisions. So I was very cautious about who I spoke to. And I only spoke to two people, my sister and the friend who I thought would be most understanding. She was going through a breakup as well, and I thought she would have the most nuance. The friends I did not speak to were the ones who I knew would absolutely hate him, because if there was even a 2% chance of staying, I knew they couldn't know. And so those were the only two friends I spoke to that day. I don't even know if spoke to was the right word, because I think majority of it was crying and sobbing. I remember feeling so physically nauseous. And then there was a part of me that had this weird feeling of, I still want to check he's okay, because if he'd ever gone on a trip on a train before, I would be asking about his train time. What time are you getting on the train? And so I did end up calling him that day. I called him a few times. Again, it was largely trying to find information. I remember not eating all day. I remember only being able to sleep for 1 hour that night. And then it was about 4 o'clock in the morning when I needed to talk to someone. And the only person who would be awake at 4 o'clock in the morning was my dad. The issue is the last person I could tell was my dad, because I knew the moment I told my dad, there was no way I was staying. And I remember lying there in bed being like, why am I protecting him? The only reason I wouldn't tell my dad is because my dad can't hate him if I stay. And I think that was the moment I knew there was no part of me that was staying. We'd been trying for a baby since December. And I remember asking myself, if ending this relationship means that you are never going to have a child, would you rather never have a child or have a child with him? And there was just this really big voice in my head saying, I don't want to bring another version of him into this world. And that was the thing that weirdly made me decide that it was over. So I called my dad, I told him, and then that day was just trying to get myself back to London. I remember the whole 3-hour journey. I just cried the entire way back. He had left for the business trip that morning, so I was going back to my apartment, and I told him to make sure he was out before I got back. And all my friends came over that evening because I couldn't bear the idea of staying in that apartment alone. I mean, through all of this, I was still getting congratulations texts, and I remember arriving to my front door and seeing 3 bouquets of flowers saying congratulations when I arrived. There was a really big part of me that couldn't let go of the fact that what were the chances that I saw that DM? What were the chances that she followed me? What were the chances that out of the 3 women she slept with, there was only 1 in the country, and that one woman followed me? And not only that, That was the day I got engaged. Can you imagine how many DMs I was getting? The reason why I saw her DM is because she DM'd me in May 2021 before I'd even met him, saying how much she loved my books and how much her books had helped her and how she recommends it to all her friends. And because I had replied saying thank you, her DM had come into the section where all my friends and family's messages come into. There was something about that DM that really tapped into my spiritual side of it felt like something was protecting me. It felt like I was meant to find out. And yes, finding out the day after you get engaged is awful. But that morning, I remember he was upset that I had shared it because he kept saying, you said you'd wait until we were married. And I just kept thinking, can you imagine if I'd waited until we were married? The day after we got married, I would share a wedding photo and then finding out then. I think it also made it easier knowing I wasn't going to stay because trying to understand him and his mentality was no longer my responsibility. There were a number of reasons why I knew I wasn't going to stay, whether it be the fact that he didn't tell me himself, the fact it was 3 times, the fact it wasn't a drunken mistake. It was a very intentional, deliberate choice to go on dating apps 3 times. The fact that he definitely didn't want me to find out. There are some people who cheat because they want out of the relationship, but those people who cheat like that leave evidence everywhere for you to find. And there was no evidence. He deleted it all. The only evidence was that one hotel confirmation. And then there was a really big part of me that knew I had to deal with it publicly because I'd announced my engagement. I'd shared his photo finally after 3 years. And very strangely, I was starting at a new agency the very next day and I was having my first meeting with them. And I called my publicist that Monday morning and asked her to come along because I've known my publicist for years. I said, I need to have this meeting. And she kept saying, you should cancel the meeting. This isn't important right now. But there's a really big part of me that doesn't let myself emotionally break down if logically and rationally I know I have something to sort. So I decided to keep that meeting in the diary, have that meeting so that they could look after anything that came in over the next month. And then I went to my sister's. I knew I couldn't be alone for the next week. And I spent most of that week crying, painting because I couldn't read or watch TV. And then very strangely, because I thought I was going to be pregnant soon, I'd booked this solo trip for the very next week. And everyone in my life told me to cancel it, that I shouldn't be alone. But there was a part of me that thought that might be the most healing thing for me, that actually if I threw myself into the deep end of being alone, it would give me the perfect place to break down. And so I ended up going on the solo trip. It wasn't the pre-baby trip I thought it would be, but it most definitely was the break from my life that I needed and the place where I did a lot of my crying and healing, trying to make sense of what had just happened to me. I don't think I quite know how this is going to impact my life. I definitely know there are probably going to be trust issues in the future. But for right now, I'm doing okay. I have shocked myself because I know I'm strong, but I've never seen the strength in me that I've had for the last few months. And there's something quite amazing about waking up each morning and like being so proud of yourself and impressing yourself every day. And the public aspect of it, I waited 3 weeks to announce it. And when I did not expect the attention that it got. But part of me thinks that attention happened because there are so many women living in shame around being cheated on, thinking that that means they're worthless, not beautiful enough, not good enough. And you know what? Fuck that. Because it's not your shame, it's his. And you didn't do anything wrong. And even if your relationship was crap, then he could have ended it. There is no reason in the world to betray someone like that. And frankly, it's cowardice. The fact that he couldn't actually face me and tell me what he'd done and waited for someone else to tell me. But I'm so glad I know. I have found my feet in the dating world again, and I've actually forgot how much I miss being single, which has been a lovely, lovely thing to return back to. I think the fact that I always loved being single has been a really safe place to land through all of this. And I'll keep filling you in as my life unfolds and I find my feet with all of it. But it's been nice to be able to share my proposal story because that was a very happy memory. And as much as it's very different now looking back on it, I am trying to preserve the positives in the relationship. I don't think it's helpful looking back and demonizing every aspect of the last 3 years. But we're moving on. We're moving forward. We're welcoming back the podcast, which I've wanted for so many years and I'm very excited about. And as more lessons and learnings come along the way, I'll be filling you in. But I hope that's answered some of the questions that you've had about what actually happened, where it happened, how I found out, how he reacted, how he's reacted since. Is he wants me back. He will do anything to take me back, but I'm not going back. I've moved on. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Follow, subscribe, and if you like this episode, then leave us a review as well.